Hey everybody, welcome to today's show. I'm here with Kurt Mexican, and we have a special guest with us today. Neil Oliver is a Scottish archaeologist, historian, broadcaster, and writer. He's perhaps best known for the award-winning documentary series Coast, as well as his two critically acclaimed landmark BBC history series, A History of Scotland and A History of Ancient Britain. He's written 14 books, presented 19 series for national broadcasters, recorded 2 major podcast series, hosts a live show on GBN News, and broadcasts weekly on his online channel. Please welcome to the show, Neil Oliver. Hey, Neil.
What an excellent introduction. Thank you very much, Jimmy Dore.
Well, you know what? It's really, I'm excited to have you on. We're all big fans of yours here. We quote you often and show parts of your videos. So you're doing great work. And I saw this. It says, Neil Oliver, it's going to get ugly. So tell me, what did you mean by that?
I think to try and be positive and looking to maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but sooner eventually. I think the troublemakers are going to fall because what they're doing is a subversion of, an inversion of everything that life is properly all about. It's an anti-human agenda. It subverts natural law apart from anything else. And on account of that, they will fall over. But when I say it's going to get ugly, it's a predatory animal, like a wounded tiger, and before it falls for the last time, it will lash out. And I would predict whatever a false flag event or events, I would predict that things will get more spectacular. There will be trouble ahead and ugliness. But it's part of a kind of a necessary process. I don't know. It's like the pain of childbirth. Maybe maybe we've all got to go through this pain until we get to the good part.
So who are the troublemakers in your view?
Well, I would say I subscribe to the notion that there's a move to centralized power. I think by definition, if you know their names and have seen their faces, then those people are middle management at best, and are essentially irrelevant. They're just irritant and annoying and getting the message out. But when you say who are they, they're operating out of sight. Maybe they have done for a protracted period of time, but I think I talk to other people as well. You do too. I talk to you. There's others always, and I think it's palpable that centralizing power has never been as exposed, has never been as wounded, arguably never been as frightened. I think a lot of their motivation comes from fear. I think what's being done, this attempt to take control of every aspect of everybody's lives and stop people moving around and stop people having freedom to speak and think. Those are the responses that are driven by fear. I think we're ultimately dealing with frightened people whose response to assuage their own fear is to try and get everybody under the boot heel. And I think it's becoming more and more obvious. But they will go down.
So I think what I hear you saying is, for instance, let me play you this video. So this is that mental case.
This little homunculus.
Now I'm blanking. Is Huvel is his first name?
Harari.
Noah. I think it's
Noah Yuval Harari.
So this guy is a WEF guy, and he was been working with Klaus Schwab, who's recently retired, and these are the people who want to re-engineer the whole world, and they're in pushing transhumanism.
No free will. That's the thing they love to bring up.
No free will. You'll own nothing. You'll be happy. Which is, I think that's what Stalin said. I think that's what Stalin said. But anyway,
you know what this guy said? He goes, what our rights are invisible. If you cut open a person, you do not see the rights. Did you do that, Yuval?
Yeah. So listen, I want to play this for you because I became more aware of you when you spoke out against the COVID narrative, right? So there's only been a handful of people with platforms that actually have pushed back against the COVID narrative. The COVID narrative, which, didn't only come from the United States, but it came from the WHO, the WF, Bill Gates, who basically runs the WHO because he's their biggest donor. And so I want to play this for you. And this was chilling when I heard it, and I just want to get your response.
COVID is critical because this is what convinces people to accept, to legitimize total biometric surveillance.
Okay, so I don't know if you heard his first word was COVID is critical. So I'll just start it again.
COVID is critical because this is what convinces people to accept, to legitimize total biometric surveillance. If we want to stop this epidemic, we need not just to monitor people, we need to monitor what's happening under their skin, their body temperature. Like we walked in here, we had to go through a body temperature test. Now they're using it to see whether you have the coronavirus. But exactly the same technology can determine what you think about the government. Anger is a biological phenomena just like disease. It's not some spiritual thing out there. It's a biological pattern in your body. With this kind of surveillance, you watch the big president, the big leader, gives a speech on television. The television could be monitoring you and knowing whether you're angry or not, just by analyzing the cues, the biological cues coming from your body. Are you angry about what you hear? Are you frightened? Are you bored? This is the kind of power that Stalin didn't have. When Stalin gave a speech, everybody, of course, clapped their hand and smiled. Now, how do you know what they really think about Stalin? It's very difficult. You can't have a KGB agent following everybody all the time. Even if you do it, he's just watching your outside behavior. He doesn't really know what's happening in your mind. But in 10 years, the future Stalins of the 21st century, they could be watching the minds, the brains of all the population all the time.
Okay, so this ironically was at the Democracy Forum,
yeah,
and sponsored
it would be, wouldn't it?
by the New York Times. So what is this is what these people I've noticed have been pushing, and they're giddy over what happened during COVID and vaccine passports and mandates. And what's your response to hearing him say that?
I've got a couple of his books on my shelves. I read some of his books before he came to this notoriety that he's had in more recent years through association with WEF and so on. But although, having said that, I'm not sure how long he's been associated with the WEF. I'm never quite clear when I listen to him whether I think he actually believes and subscribes to this stuff,
yeah, same
or whether
thing,
he's just saying what is possible. I don't know if he's necessarily an advocate of it, or whether he's just a kind of a prophet saying that these things are coming. However, I don't doubt for a moment that what he is declaring as possible and what he's saying is imminent is truthful. I think these biometric and other means of monitoring people are definitely coming down the pipe at us. When it comes to, it's interesting that you took care to point out that his opening word was COVID. I increasingly subscribe now to the belief that COVID was nothing new. I think it was a coronavirus, and I think it was just a manifestation of an infection that's probably been with us in the ecosystem for decades or longer. I don't think it was anything new. And in any event, I don't think it matters whether it was anything new, because when you look at the data that comes out of, say, a European country like Germany, and we've all certainly been raised to think that Germany is thorough when it comes to data and analysis. They were able to, they've pinpointed that nothing clinically alarming was happening in 2019, 2020. But hospital bed occupancy was at a record low, actually, in 2019 and early 2020. And they only started noticing anything troubling later on, when the products pushed as vaccines, which they aren't. They're experimental gene therapies, but the situation started to change then. But people simply weren't dying of a pandemic in any meaningful sense. So I think COVID was simply an opportunity, as he's suggesting there. My wife actually has said for years that the election of Donald Trump in 2016 and the Brexit vote in the UK, the vote to leave the European Union, were two unscripted, unexpected events that slipped through, and that everything that's happened in America, around the world, certainly in Britain, since 2016, has been a sustained punishment beating to put the people back in their box. And COVID, whatever COVID was, and I think if it was a pandemic of anything, it was a pandemic of dodgy misuse of PCR tests that were never supposed to be a diagnostic tool. They were a forensic bit of kit that the designer of the PCR test said should never be used in that way. I think it was an endemic of nasal rape by the testing. It was a pandemic of propaganda. I think, but to get back to what Noah Harari is saying, I think that is what a sliver of the elite would imagine that they would like to see, how they would like to see the world being run. But it's absurd. It's a perversion of the natural order. It's absolutely ridiculous. I think they can fantasize about these things to their heart's content. But in my heart, I do not accept that any of that needs to come to pass if enough people simply say, don't be ridiculous. And that's the most polite language that you could possibly use in that context. And I think what's interesting as well is I believe we've entered some kind of what are you going to do about it anyway phase of our civilization. That the bad is the elites, whoever the centralizing, they know the mask has slipped. They know that we know. But they've realized, or it seems plain to them, that it doesn't matter because they've got all the stuff anyway. They've got all the money. They've got all the guns. They've got all the drones. They've got all the technology. And I think it's dawned on enough of them that, you know what, it doesn't matter if, what are they going to do about it? But I think the reality is it does matter. And it's very, very simple in essence that when 8 billion people are aware, and you only need a small percentage, a tiny percentage of that 8 billion people to just say no and mean it, and to declare that the future that's being envisioned by these people and whatever Harari is, whether he's a prophet or a spokesman or whether he's warning us, I don't know, but it doesn't have to be like that.
So, Kurt, do you want to say something?
So whenever you see this guy talking, and we watch the one with the mind-reading earbuds for your boss to make sure you're paying attention at work, all WEF, and they always do this thing, and I always notice where you're like, wait, are you for or against this?
Yeah.
But that's the trick. It's like they already stole your watch. All this technology's been out for 30 years. They're just testing how much they can be open about they have this stuff. And then they always do the same trick. They go, well, it's here, so we got to have a discussion about it.
Yeah.
And then you're like, wait, so you're for or against? They're like, yeah, no, I know. It's really scary. But are you against it? They always keep, and it's already here. They already have this stuff. They had it. All the tech is like 30 years behind what these assholes have. So that's what they're doing, is probing to see where everybody's at with the plan. I think you're right about the unscripted thing, throwing the whole thing on. I've never seen, I mean, it looks like sheer panic from 2 events.
So
go ahead. And it's all fear. It's all fear. Everything manifests as fear. our headlines are full again, but here in the UK, predicting one frightening event after another. And the daddy of all fears, obviously, is nuclear Armageddon, and they're dangling that over everybody's heads at the moment. But I don't buy it because, these people want to continue with their cosseted special lives. And they're not going to ever unleash anything that's been, gain of function made lethal, because they're ultimately breathing the same air, and so are their children and their grandchildren. Neither are they going to have, global Armageddon, because they don't want their windows broken and their cars scratched. It's all just about pushing terror. It's very easy to frighten people. That's been made abundantly clear in the last 4 years alone. But this is a generational thing. You can always frighten people. But again, that is all they've got. It's just fear porn, fear propaganda. And I honestly feel if I have, there's nothing special about me. And if I've clocked it, and if my wife and I have realised that, they all got a bit of a fright because everybody went off piste in 2016, elected Donald Trump on one side of the Atlantic and voted to leave the European Union on the other. And they've just had to put their foot on the gas and go for it. And we can see it. And if it's obvious to someone like me, then it must be pretty bloody obvious.
So that's what I've always said. I'm a C-student comedian, and if I can see this, I know the people who are smarter than me must be able to see it, and most of them just don't speak up because of cowardice, fear of losing their position in polite society and things like that, and that comes back to COVID. Now we have this guy, Andrew Cuomo, Chris Cuomo, Andrew's son, who was a very popular CNN... What's that?
Son.
Brother.
Got it.
No, Andrew Cuomo. Oh, yeah, that's
Mario's
right.
the dad.
That's right. Mario was the dad. Andrew's the brother. Thank you.
Chris is Luigi. Remember him as
that's
Luigi
right. That's
Cuomo.
right. So now he's running around because he got vaccine injured, and he's taking ivermectin, and he's talking about how we were lied to about ivermectin. Meanwhile, he spent 3 years shaming anybody who told you the truth about it, and when only taking a Google search for him to find out that ivermectin was a human medicine, and that they scared you by saying it was a horse dewormer, don't take it, it'll make you sick, that it's only for animals, that if it would have literally 30 seconds of a Google search, he would have found out that it won the Nobel Prize for Human Medicine. It's on the WHO list of essential medicines, and now he's running around going, all the clinicians knew that ivermectin was safe, and it was a human medicine, and he says, I know that now because I'm talking to them. Well, I guess he wasn't talking to anybody for 3 years when he was shaming everybody. And so now what do you make of those people, right? Does it take somebody to get vaccine injured to come tell the truth? And now they're trying to absolve all their past sins, and the people who aren't trying to absolve their past sins are trying to memory hole them like, oh, COVID's over, let's move on. Yeah. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, memory holding is right. Absolutely, one of the most sinister aspects to this, and the thing that has me most enraged at the moment, is the number of the people that were pushing it, that were cheerleaders for it, that were instigators of it, that helped to choreograph it and led it on and did all the shaming and the ridiculing and the name calling and all of the rest of it. And they think that it's already time that we've all forgotten. I find, as you say, with someone like Chris Cuomo, who seems to think that nobody kept receipts, that nobody kept recordings of things that were said just a couple of years ago. The idea that they can already absolve themselves of all sin and pretend that they were on our side of the line the whole time without at any moment pausing to draw breath and say, I really messed up massively. My behaviour was inexcusable. I'm ashamed. I look back now and I see how I was, and I see the way that I treated fellow human beings, othering, making out that human beings who hadn't taken an experimental medical intervention were vectors of disease, unclean. I'm, mea culpa. I feel so terrible about it. But they've missed that bit out altogether, and they've just jumped the fence, and they're now pretending that they were here promoting the efficacy of ivermectin and encouraging people to my body, my choice all along. That's the sinister bit. It's how quickly they think that everyone has forgotten. And maybe I think many people who took the products, and many people did it to keep their jobs, and because they were genuinely frightened, and because they really thought that they were doing the right thing, and because they had been persuaded that it was the right thing for their communities and all of the rest of it. And now those people, I think so many of those people just can't believe that they did it, which is understandable. And so there is a big appetite out there to forget and move on. But I think it's absolutely beholden on people like us to say, no, there's a stage we've got to go through, and it's owning up, taking responsibility, accepting responsibility, and acknowledging what was done. I mean, many people, like Jordan Peterson and many other people out there have said that in the West, we all grew up in the second half of the 20th century or whatever, believing when we watched the movies that we would have joined the French resistance, that we would have sheltered our neighbours, that we would have been the heroes. That was the way everyone was invited to think. That was the vicarious thrill of those maverick characters that were invited to worship on celluloid. But the COVID experience showed so many people that actually, when the single choice of their generation came down the line at them, they were Gestapo. They were ready to don the uniform and kick the doors in. And I think that's an incredibly difficult realization for people. That when the choice was finally there, when we were being sorted, when that sorting of people was going on, so many people went the wrong way, and there's an enormous reckoning that has to be lived up to and lived through and accepted. And unless and until that happens, people like me are going to keep on banging on and saying, no, we got there. It's all on record. What you did, what you said. And the extent to which COVID was simply used as a tool to open a door to bring in this technological revolution, which leads to a digital archipelago. We can see it. It's plain. It's evident and clear. And as long as it's incumbent upon enough of us because it doesn't take everyone. It's incumbent that there'll just be enough of us that say no. We remember exactly what happened, who said what, and the consequences that need to apply.
Well, Dr. Fauci, who was the biggest pusher of all the propaganda around masks and the vaccines and mandates and 6-foot social distancing and locking down schools and shutting businesses and masking children and toddlers. And he was the biggest one screaming about that always. He's now being questioned in front of Congress today in the United States, finally, in 2024, June. And you have Democrats who are running cover for him as if it's some kind of partisan attack against him. And they've made it political in the United States. I don't know what it's like in Scotland, but they made anybody who questioned the establishment narrative or questioned the science that they were being told was the science, which is how science works. You question it, and if you can't question it, it's not science. That's religion. And so, what all those people, I don't know if it was like that in Scotland. If you question it, you were considered a right-wing conspiracy theorist, crazy. Is that what happened?
By now, Jimmy, I mean, 4 years in, because for me, it started with COVID. I started for the first time really in my life. Well, I mean, I spoke out about COVID, but then I've spoken out about everything else since. I've spoken out about the Ukraine war. I've spoken out about what's happening in Gaza. I've spoken out about the climate hoax. I'm a way out where the buses don't go, and I have been, I've been called everything. I've been an aluminium hat wearing crank. I've been an anti-vaxxer. I've been a granny killer. I've been a Putin apologist. I've been I've been anti-Semitic. I've had everything labelled at me. But to be quite frank, 4 years in, if you're not being abused in that way, or if you haven't been the subject of that kind of flack, then you're not in the fight. You're not in the game. It's a badge of honour to be treated in this way. And it's worth remembering anyway that no good deed goes unpunished. That's just a fact of life that predates all of this. People are in a hurry to forgive themselves and to forgive each other for the sins that were committed. But what will never be forgotten and will never be forgotten, what will never be forgotten and will never be forgiven, are the people who were just right. They called it right. That'll never be forgiven. That's unforgivable. Having been right about this stuff. And as I say, no good deed goes unpunished. It's extra. If you're complicit in the general crime, and you go, well, we forgive each other. Yeah, I'll forgive myself. Will you forgive yourself? Yes, I'll forgive you. You forgive me. And let's all move on. But those characters over there that called it right and asked the right questions, we'll get them later. We'll let the dust settle, but we've got their names and addresses. I mean, that's what it feels like.
Well, that's how trauma-based mind control works.
Yeah,
you'll never be forgiven for being right.
Well, I'm so happy to hear you say that, because I realized that when I would bring on comedian friends of mine who were pro-mandate, pro-masking, pro-lockdown, all the propaganda, people who do shows that are called Exposing Government Secrets, came on and just didn't care about the secrets, didn't question, and they came on and they were 100,000% wrong, and they wanted workers to get fired for not taking mandated experimental therapy and all kinds of stuff like that. And what I had said, I realized it's like, I can forgive them for being wrong, but they will never forgive me for being right. And that's exactly what's happened. No one has ever come back to me and said, hey, you know what? I was wrong about that. You were right. I'm sorry. No, they call me a right winger. They all the names, the conspiracy theorists, the racists, the anti-Semitic, all that stuff.
Have you encountered Vera Sharif in your travels so far? She an older lady. She was with her mother when she was about 4 or 5 years old. She and her mother ended up in a concentration camp, the Jewish mother and daughter, and they survived the camp. And Vera Sharif has lived most of her life in the USA. She's at least in her 80s now. I brought her onto my show on GB News because she had brought out a documentary called Never Again Is Now, a 5-part documentary series, where she was pointing at the fact that she was with great pain in her heart was watching tactics that she had seen used against the Jewish populations in the 1930s and elsewhere in Europe. She'd watched some of it surfacing again, this othering of people on the grounds of being unclean, being vectors of disease, being liable to infect, and therefore being the sort of people who should be shunned. And she was saying that these are the warning signs. You can't allow this. This is the on-ramp to a motorway that goes to a very dark place. Vera Sharif has been convicted of being a Holocaust denier in, I think, Bavaria. She's in absentia, in absence. She's convicted of denying the Holocaust. Now, she is a survivor of the camps. And I had her on, and I spoke to her, just for a few minutes, really, and we talked about our documentary series. And it was in the aftermath of talking like that I too was labelled as anti-Semitic at that point. Now, that's upside down through the looking glass Alice in Wonderland world. That's I don't know where to begin to process being perceived in that way by some parts of the mainstream media. it's so ludicrous.
It's a magical curse now.
I daren't look at it because you think that's so absurd. That's so ridiculous that even to dignify that with a response would be difficult to process. But you're absolutely right. Your friends, they will not. I've had hatchet jobs done on me in the national press by people who were friends of mine years ago. They suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Hadn't spoken to them in a long, long time, but they come on to deliver hatchet jobs about, if I'd known what he was like when I met him at the time, I would have crossed the street to avoid him. All of that has gone on, and it will never be the case. You can be as wrong as you like, and then there's a mutual forgiveness goes on. But if you were right, that's unforgivable.
So I know how they're in a hurry to memory hole it. They tried to say COVID's over. That's yesterday. Who cares? I think we need to have a South African truth and reconciliation kind of happening, and it seems like it's starting right now with Fauci today in Congress. I don't know if you saw any of those videos. Yeah. I have a few I'll play later, but I don't know. I haven't been to Scotland. I was just in Europe. We didn't go to Scotland, but everywhere I went, I went to Sweden, I went to Amsterdam, I went to Berlin, we went to Denmark, London. Everywhere we went, people felt exactly the way we do here in the United States. They were tired of being lied to by the media. They were tired of being gaslit. They were desperate for the truth. And they were, people they would look at me with tears in their eyes and say, thank you for standing up. And, I didn't think that would happen in Europe. But so let me ask you what it's like in Scotland. Is it the same? Is it the same big riff, left, right, for, against? What's it like there?
Well, there is a split. There was a split then at the time between those who were going along with it and those who were just variations on holding up their hands and saying, "I've got a couple of questions. Is that okay?" And all points left and right of there. We say here now that there's a uniparty, there's a general election coming up.
Yes.
Next in July, most of us are talking about the fact that it's a uniparty, that what used to be the Labour Party, which was socialist, what used to be the Conservative Party, which was conservative, it's now two cheeks of the same arse. And you can't tell the difference. You can't tell the difference between them. There's massive voter apathy. I would have thought that will go through the process of that. We've got to go through the agony of the pantomime of. I can't believe that mainstream journalists are still going through the pantomime of interviewing people from the Labour Party, people from the Conservative Party, people from the Liberal Party, people from the Scottish National Party, as though these people were anything but sock puppets. They're just utterly empty. They're devoid of character, devoid of personality, and they're just saying whatever they've seen on the laminated card that's been handed to them. That morning. There's no conviction. There's no meaning. So it's soul destroying. But I would say that there's a far bigger, more fundamental problem, that the trust has just gone for a very significant, maybe not the majority of the population, but that significant, maybe, I don't know, 15%, I don't know, I'm just pulling figures out of the sky there, who just now think, well, if they lied to us about safe and effective, if they lied to us about transmissibility and all of that litany that you and I are now, so kind of conversant in, if they lied to us about that, then you find yourself on the first step of the staircase of disbelief. You've stepped onto something at that point, and before you know where you are, you're internalizing the hang on a minute. So JFK was actually murdered by the deep state, and we've been being lied to for a lifetime. And if they lied about that, where are we? Yeah, and then you take more steps on the staircase of disbelief, and before you know where you are, you're going, right, well, probably 9/11 was an inside job then. You don't. And once that trust goes, and once you start looking around at the world around you, which you had taken as real, as three-dimensional, and now it's all just clapperboard and a dodgy set, and it's all starting to fall over, and you think, what can I believe in? What can I actually trust? And when the trust goes, For example, sure as life, they'll bring forward, airborne Ebola, monkeypox, whatever, and they'll say, and here's the magic bullet for that. Here's the vaccine for that. And a significant proportion of the population are going to go over my dead body. But I'm simply not going to go anywhere near that in a way that was not the case before. And so I think we're living through a very interesting time in that way, amongst many ways that are making all of this very interesting. There's a measurable percentage of the population now that just completely distrust authority. Completely distrust authority. I just wait until a politician's lips are moving, and then I know he's lying. And that is I think once you go through that transition, once that happens to you, there's no way back. You've crossed the Rubicon at that point.
Well, what does it bother me? But why do we have a memory hole? I remember this word memory hole came out. I don't know.
It's from 1984.
Is that what it was?
Orwell, yeah.
Yeah, but why do we have that in real life? A memory hole? I thought that was history.
No, he's predicting what would come, and it came.
So now there's a trauma, right?
Yeah.
You get traumatized. They burn that, and then they go, remember to forget, and you go to the next trauma.
Yes.
And it sounds exactly like MK Ultra, but on a nationwide scale.
The extent to which the world's governments are using 1984 as an instruction manual is overwhelming. It's supposed to be a warning. And the whole idea of the forever war, so you had the three states of Oceania, East Asia, and Eurasia, and everyone was, if you were in, and that's what, and so when we watched that bizarre, I'll never forget watching that 98-year-old SS bona fide Nazi. And he was introduced as someone who, and let's give him a big round of applause because Mr. Hunka fought the Russians in World War II.
Yeah.
And you go, just point of order, I'm pretty sure Canada was allied with Russia during World War II. Let's just tidy that up. But it was exactly what happened in 1984 that people were told, no. If we're angry with Russia now, that means we've always been angry with Russia.
Oh, yeah.
Always been angry with Russia. Oh, but weren't we once on the same side as Russia? Oh, be quiet. Forget that, and that's where the memory holding comes in. You've got to, you can, and the double speak. You know it, and you don't say it, and all of that, and the extent. I don't know what George Orwell was drinking, but
he hung out with those people.
He
hung out in those groups, and that's what he was warning about. The people in those groups from those Cecil Rhodes roundtable people.
Yeah, and he did somehow see the future, and it was supposed to be a dire prophecy of what might happen. An army boot crushing down on a human face forever was supposed to be the warning, and now it's become some people's stated objective.
So I've noticed a lot of similarities, not just what's happening in the United States, but what's happening across the pond in the UK as well. I think it's happened in France. So there's an open border here in the United States. Everyone pretty much acknowledges now. Not only is there an open border, but we've covered stories where the administration, Joe Biden's administration, is flying in plane full of illegal immigrants, and they call them undocumented. And then they will go to these cities and they'll give them credit cards for $1,000 a month to go live. Whereas we have homeless people under every bridge in every major city in this country, and they won't take care of them, but they can't wait to get the country flooded with immigrants. And a lot of people have a lot of different ideas on why that's happening, but it's definitely happening, and it's definitely a policy. And one for sure reason is to suppress the wages of workers. There's no doubt that's another reason in the United States is because people aren't joining the military anymore, and so they're promising them citizenship if they join the military. So that's too. That, by the way, that's the way Rome fell. But so. Is it similar in the UK? Is there this flood of immigrants and people don't know why?
It's on a different scale and it's happening in a different way. The fact that you've got the Darien Gap shortly won't be a gap anymore. They're building a bridge there to complete the connection from Southern America through to the USA and the way in which all the NGOs and the United Nations and they're all set up to move people en masse from south to north. So clearly there's a deliberate policy of moving people every which way. What's happening in the United Kingdom is that we've got the English Channel that had always been celebrated as a kind of a castle moat that kept out Napoleon, and it kept out Hitler and everybody else. And now it's just a free for all. And the little boats come every day when the weather's good, and they're picked up by the Royal National Lifeboat Institution and by Border Patrol, and they're brought into the southern ports, and then they're distributed out into the wider terrain, and they're given help, and they're given money, and they're given accommodation, and they're put up in hotels, and so on and so on. So it's analogous. It's not exactly the same, and also, I mean, it's the population of Britain has been more altered, I think, in the last 20 years demographically than is comparable with any other country on earth. It's a massive demographic change has happened. The altering of Britain demographically is not paralleled, I don't think, anywhere else. Pound for pound, it's a smaller country with a smaller population, obviously, than the United States of America. Why that's happening? Because, I mean, if there was any intention to stop that flow of people, you would stop it tomorrow. You would just stop it. It would be easily done, because that waterway has been being patrolled by the Navy and by others, for generations, for hundreds of years. And suddenly it's a free-for-all. Suddenly it's impossible. So clearly, the reason that the small boats and the mass migration is happening is because it's supposed to happen. It's not being stopped because no one wants to stop it, or no one with their hands on the levers of power wants to stop it. And you've got these farcical things like Rishi Sunak announcing that he's going to fly the odd plane to Rwanda. And move people at enormous cost per person to be relocated to Rwanda and all of the rest of it. And no one really thinks for a minute that any of that's actually going to happen. But again, and then you've got to say to yourself, these people that are on the move are also coming from places elsewhere in the world that have been so messed up by the likes of us, by the West. By these policies of the West, of NATO and the rest, destabilizing, bombing the bejesus out of these places until they're rendered into rubble, and then obviously people are on the move, and so there's a lot of anger targeted towards the incomers. And you think, well, fair enough, because people are worried about their communities being utterly changed. They're worried about the arrival of different heritage, different culture, different religion. You can understand the tensions that ensue. But the people that are arriving are pawns as well. They've had their reality messed up as well, and they're on the move. So, and the message that you kind of want to get out there, or the thing you want to get out, is everyone should link elbows left and right with everyone that's standing either side of them, because the problem's above us. It's them up there, that centralising force that's taking the piss out of us. And punching down on us and everyone, black, white and brown, Muslim, Christian, Jewish, and all of the rest of it. We should all just be setting aside our, the internecine squabbles for 5 minutes and realising where the real trouble is. And it's because we're being messed with, one and all.
Yeah,
and, and rather than fighting with one another.
Go ahead.
No, that's that. I mean, it's the extent. There's another aspect of the way in which we're being messed with and played with. Group is being set against group. Creed is being set against creed. Color is being set against color. We've got all of that going on in Britain at the moment. You think, well, wait a minute. Yes, there are tensions, and yes, there are all sorts of problems that ensue when you mix. People that don't really want to be together, and there's a pretense at integration which is never going to happen. Yes, these are all absolute problems that are massive in people's lives, but you've got to pull back a bit and go, but who's doing this? Why is it suddenly the case that we can't man a border? Why can we suddenly not control the comings and goings of people into the country, which was done effectively for hundreds of years, and now all of a sudden they say, well, there's nothing we can do about it. They're coming and they're here to stay.
Yeah, I mean, the policies of, just here in the Western Hemisphere, how we sanction and overthrow democracies. We do that in the Middle East. We did it in Iraq, displaced 1 million people. Look what we did to Libya. We turned the most successful country in Africa, turned it into a failed state with open slave markets and people fleeing there. So that is, again, and what NATO's doing throughout throughout Africa and the Middle East. We're just, look, with 20 years in Afghanistan, look what we did to Syria. It's the same thing over and over and over again. And so again, it's not to demonize the immigrants, but it's to demonize the people who are creating the conditions that create this. And it's like they want chaos. And I've always said, go ahead.
The problem you've got, there's a brilliant book by Eric Hoffer called True Believer. I'm sure you're aware of it, read it, and the ways in which populations are destabilized over and over again. It's a playbook, and it works a treat. And one of the things that happens is that people are encouraged to think that everything that they hold dear is actually suboptimal, to put it mildly. That their national identity is questionable, that their history is shameful. They bring it closer to home and suggest that the things that your parents believe are contemptible. They deracinate people. They cut people away from their roots. People become anywheres. They're persuaded that they don't belong anywhere, and therefore they could be moved anywhere. And this is done by every mass movement, every ideology, fascism, communism, Nazism. They all do the same things. They make people feel worthless. They make them feel as if they come from somewhere worthless. We've got this fiasco at the moment where the Conservative Party, as part of its electioneering for the coming general election, is promising the return of national service. Right? It's promising that kids will go into either working voluntary in the community or going into the army or going into the military. Now, they're pushing national service at a time after a generational attempt to discourage kids from Britain of being proud of Britain at all. The kids have been being told for a generation at least that Britain's history is only shameful, imperialist, colonial, and all of the rest of it. And so you say, serve which nation exactly? Because you've been telling these kids that are coming of age now, that their nation is shameful, and that there are so many things that they should be ashamed of individually and collectively. And you look at what's happening to our veterans. I'm sure it's the same in the States. We've got veterans living on the streets, homeless, disregarded, post-traumatic stress disorder, and all of the rest of it. That's how they treat the full-time professional military in this country. And they're saying to kids, wouldn't it be great if you gave a year of your life to serving the military and be proud of your flag? We've got a situation at the moment where if you were to fly the Union Jack from a flagpole in your back garden, you're eminently likely to get a knock on your door, and it would be a policeman saying that the neighbours had reported you for a hate crime by flying the national flag. And then on parallel tracks, they're saying, national service, serve your country. Which country? Whose country? I thought I was supposed to be ashamed of the place. And now you want my kids to go and give 12 months of their life and possibly serve what? And is that just the on-ramp to conscription? Are you just going to eventually find a reason to push them towards the meat grinder in Ukraine or similar? There's no joined up thinking to it at all. And the extent to which these people seem to think that all of us are too blind to see it is frankly insulting.
So, speaking of hate crime, there was a big hate crime bill in Scotland, and I wanted to play this brief news report about it and get your reaction.
Scotland's new hate crime laws have come into force, but why are some people calling it controversial? The Hate Crime and Public Order Act came into effect on Monday the 1st of April, aiming to tackle the harm caused by hatred and prejudice towards people with certain characteristics, including religion, sexual orientation, and transgender identity. Supporters of the new bill insist that it will make Scotland more tolerant, but opponents have argued that it will stifle free speech and could even be weaponised to settle scores. Director of the campaign group for Women Scotland said the act was a mess and that many malicious reports will be made.
We know that there are people out there who have got lists of people that they are looking to target, that they are seeing this as an opportunity to settle scores.
Celebrities like J.K. Rowling and Elon Musk have both publicly criticised the new bill. Miss Rowling has long been involved in a battle with the transgender community, who accuse her of being transphobic. The author denies this accusation, saying she wants to defend women's rights. Miss Rowling put out a series of comments on X about transgender women, including double rapist Isla Bryson, who was jailed for 8 years last year for raping 2 women. Bryson, who was born Adam Graham and living as a man at the time of the attacks, was initially housed in an all-female jail before the decision received backlash. J.K. Rowling has dared police to arrest her after criticising the new hate crime laws. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has also defended J.K. Rowling, saying people should not be criminalised for stating simple facts on biology.
We're not going to do anything like that here in England. We should not be criminalising people saying common sense things about biological sex. Clearly that isn't right. We have a proud tradition of free speech, and I think it just shows, whether it's the SNP or the Labour, these are the wrong set of priorities for the country. I'm focused on delivering on the things that really matter.
Holyrood Minister Siobhan Brown has said that some people could be investigated by police if they misgender someone online. First Minister Humza Yousaf has defended the legislation, saying there has been a rising tide of hatred against people because of their protected characteristics in recent years.
I believe that the new offences that have been created, they will be policed in again a very similar way, policed sensibly. And of course, the police deal with vexatious complaints on probably a daily basis, and therefore will undoubtedly, if there are vexatious complaints, be able to deal with that in a way that again is sensible. This bill is about protecting people against that rising tide of hatred we see far too prevalent in our society nowadays.
Mr. Yousaf has repeatedly said that disinformation is being spread about this new bill and what it entails, but there is no doubt that some people expect it to be weaponised.
So what is your response to the new hate crime bill? Is it as bad as it seems to me here, that exactly what they're predicting, that these people are now going to go after people for having different opinions, telling their truth about gender and sex, and they're going to make everything is seen through a racial prism? Well, what's your response to it, Neil?
Well, the beauty of it was, first of all, it was brought into statute on April Fool's Day, which was a nice comedy touch. It's also important to point out that the legislation was already there on the statute books to go after people for whatever, for being offensive and abusive and all the rest of it. The legal framework is already there to enable the police to deal with any and all of the kind of things that were being highlighted by Humza Yousaf and others there. It's even the intention that people could be criminalised for things they say in the privacy of their own home. That hypothetically, if there was a family sitting around the dinner table of an evening, and the dad said something that was off colour in some way, I don't know, and a child maybe repeated that at school the next day, my dad says that could come into the hearing of another child or a teacher. That would then be reported to the police, and then there would be a knock at your door, and you would find yourself facing potentially criminal charges for what you said and thought behind closed doors with the curtains drawn in your own house. It's absolutely what was being described. It's an attempt to censor. It's an attempt to silence. It's just yet another lever being pulled to make people adopt the mindset that, it's just for a quiet life, I'll just keep my head down and my mouth shut. And as far as humanly possible, I won't let anybody, even inside my own house, know what I think about anything. It's just a dampening down of thought and a dampening down of speech. And it's insidious and it's sinister. And as was foretold in the first week, talk about vexatious complaints. I think the police got something like 10 or 11,000 logged allegations about hate crimes having been committed. And the police were saying, they had said in advance, they said, this is going to be a nightmare for us. And it was then the case that if it continued at that rate, that by the end of the year, the police would be dealing with more allegations of hate crime than all other crimes put together. Everything that was warned by the legal community, by the police, by all sorts of free speech advocates and all of the rest of it, organizations dedicated to ensuring that people are free to go about their business without being pestered by the police every minute of the day. Everyone predicted all of these things and all of it came to pass. But it came out of the Scottish National Party, devolved administration, who have a long record of bringing in hopeless, ill thought out, vague, amateurish legislation. I mean, that is a political party travelling in a clown car. And by now, the clown car just pulls up, and the doors fall off, and the wheels fall off, and the horn goes wah wah. I mean, they're just not to be taken seriously in any way.
Well, it seems to me that this hate crime thing, it's just another attempt to control people, and exactly what you described, make people afraid to speak up. And in the United States, they got rid of habeas corpus, right? So now you don't have a right to a speedy trial or even to know what your charges are, like you're supposed to. If they say you're a terrorist, right? And so the definition of terrorist is expanded, right? So now if you are protesting against an oil pipeline, you can be called an eco terrorist, right? If you are spreading misinformation online, you could be called a cyber terrorist. So now just another way so these hate crimes, to me, it seems like just another way to make people afraid, another way to control that. Or if someone gets out of line and stands up against the establishment can say, you're guilty of a hate crime, you're a racist, you're a phobe of some kind, and that's illegal, and you're a criminal. That's what it seems like to me.
It's a climate of fear. It's this climate of fear. And again, I mean, it's cliched now to say it, but it's Orwellian. It is that atmosphere that Orwell wrote about in 1984. And, it was the case in East Germany, in Soviet East Germany, at the height of the secret police, and when the whole thing was running at full tilt, that I think it was something like 1 in 4 people were informing. 1 in 4.
Wow.
Which meant that it had to have been an informer in every family.
Yeah.
Informing on the family as well as anybody else. That was the pitch that it had to reach. Before the whole thing eventually, fell down under its own ridiculous overburden and weight. But they're trying to inculcate this climate of fear and uncertainty. Imagine trying to, in Scotland, which made such a fuss about freedom and Braveheart, William Wallace, and all of the rest of it, and yet the very administration that campaigned for independence for Scotland, and that tried to claim the heritage of William Wallace as being what it stood for, wanting to generate an atmosphere where people were afraid to say what they thought in the privacy of their own homes, and that just by declaring your opposition to something, you became some kind of, as you say, some sort of domestic terrorist. People discriminate. It's in human nature to discriminate. You pick a partner for life. A lot of people do. That's the ultimate act of discrimination. You're saying, I pick this person and I like them better than all the others. I like that one person better than the other 8 billion. I mean, if that's a discriminatory behaviour, and why shouldn't people be able to state their opinion about what they like and what they don't like? That is in the nature of being human and alive.
Well, that's what freedom of speech, people has to constantly learn the lesson of what free speech is. You need protection for the speech that people find offensive and outrageous. You don't need protection for speech that everyone agrees with. That's the whole point of free speech, that you get to be offensive, you get to be wrong.
It's got to the point now where if I had to make a binary choice between the kind of future that we're being herded towards, or an alternative where anybody could say anything, however offensive, however foul, however, whatever, however explicit, anything, I would have to opt to live in that world. And part of the experience of going through the last several years for me is I live with name calling all the time. My timeline on social media and all of the rest of it, I'm called every name under the sun, and I don't do a thing about it. And I hadn't even realised that, and I don't intend to do anything about it. But I get hate crime committed against me more times than I could count. Sometimes multiples in a single day, and it's just water off a duck's back now. And I think, well, yeah, so what? Call me any name you like. I really, I've got better things to do with my time.
Well, that's the scary thing is that they are going to criminalize people for telling the truth, just like they did during COVID, right? Just like they do to people who tell the truth about Ukraine war. If you told the truth about COVID on social media, you got censored. And I have to always remind people that you never get in trouble for lying, right? Not real trouble. I mean, look, the reason why Julian Assange is in a prison isn't because he lied. It's because he told the truth. Same thing with Edward Snowden. He can't come back to the United States, not for lying, but for telling the truth. But in the United States, if you lie, like if the people who pushed the Russiagate hoax, which is a complete hoax and was the dumbest conspiracy theory I've ever seen, but people believed it, and the people who pushed it at the top of their lungs get rewarded with $35 million contracts. And the people who told the truth about it and tell the truth about Ukraine and tell the truth about COVID, like Tucker Carlson, they get fired. He didn't get fired for lying. He got fired for telling the truth. And that's what people need to remember. And I have one more video I'd like to show you. I came across this on Twitter, and you tell. So this is the do they call him the minister of Scotland? Is that
first minister? First minister.
And so this, I found this to be shocking. He's upset that there's white people in Scotland. Let's watch.
99% of the meetings I go to, I'm the only non-white person in the room. But why are we so surprised when the most senior positions in Scotland are filled almost exclusively by those who are white? Take my portfolio alone. The Lord President, white. The Lord Justice Clerk, white. Every High Court judge, white. The Lord Advocate, white. The Solicitor General, white. The Chief Constable, white. Every Deputy Chief Constable, white. Every Assistant Chief Constable, white. The Head of the Law Society, white. The Head of the Faculty of Advocates, white. Every prison governor, white. And not just justice. The Chief Medical Officer, white. The Chief Nursing Officer, white. The Chief Veterinary Officer, white. The Chief Social Work Advisor, white. Almost every trade union in this country headed by people who are white. In the Scottish Government, every Director General is white. Every chair of every public body is white. That is not good enough.
96% of the Scottish population are white.
Later he went to the airport and complained that everything's overpriced.
But it's in the interest of balance. Heaven help me, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. This is Humza Yousaf, who, as well as being First Minister, he's no longer. He was at the time or he was until recently the leader of the Scottish National Party. This leader of Scottish Labour is a man of Muslim descent, and he made almost exactly the same speech. It's almost word for word. He got his turn as well. The leader of Scottish Labour, he stood up and said the same litany. So and so is white. So and so is white. So and so is white. Santa Claus's beard is white. The cross on the Scottish flag is white. It was just the most ridiculous. If it was happening in any other context, in any other way, these people would have been dismissed as racists. Your feet wouldn't have touched the ground. But because of the direction from which it was coming, everyone was just invited to look on at it for the nonsense that it is. But as I say, how could you not have most posts, any jobs in Scotland occupied by Scottish people? Because the 96% of the Scottish population are white people.
Isn't that like going to India and complaining everybody's Indian?
Imagine going to Beijing.
Do that.
Imagine going to Beijing and complaining that all the people around you look Chinese, or going to going to Delhi and saying all of the there seems to be an awful lot of Indian people here.
Well, go ahead. I think Disney's going to remake Braveheart, and he's going to play William Wallace, but he's going to have to transition to a woman first, I think.
Prince the King, what is his name, Longshanks, he was saying the problem with Scottish, there's too many Scots. And that was, Prima Nocta didn't really happen, but that was the thing where the nobles are going to bang your wife before you have her, and that kicks off in the movie. It sounds like that speech.
There was a kind of a high watermark with him, I suppose, but it underscores for me the extent to which politics is dead. And politics is dead in your country also. The Republican, Democrat, who cares? And we all know that these people are just corrupted. They're just prey for lobbyists. They're all just on a revolving door of money for this, money for that, and all of the rest of it. In the UK, I cannot believe that were, as I say, that journalists are going through the pantomime of interviewing these characters about policy and about what they would do if they got elected. And you think, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what any of these people say. Because, as I say, they're just cheeks of the same arse. There is no distinguishing characteristic of any of them. And yet we still go through this I don't know what the solution is, but politics is dead and democracy is gone in our countries at the moment. That's just where we are.
Yeah, I mean, you started out talking about how when Trump got elected and Brexit happened simultaneously, that was a crack, right? That was democracy slipping through the cracks. They don't like democracy. What they like in the United States is you get to choose from two pre-selected candidates, and those candidates are selected by the establishment, which is a billionaire donor class that runs the Democrats and the billionaire donor class that runs the Republicans. They select who's going to be you're going to get to vote for, and that's that. And then when people voted for Trump, that they did not see that coming. And then when people voted for Brexit, same thing. And so you're right. Now they've criminalized Donald Trump. They've criminalized his political movement, and they're doing it all over the world, right? So if you stand up against NATO and the war machine, you'll become a criminal. Look what happened to Imran Khan in Pakistan. He said the people don't want to go along with the NATO wars, and they immediately threw him in jail. Same thing's happening in Brazil. They put Lula in jail first, then now they're making it a criminal out of Bolsonaro. They're doing the same thing here. So it's not. You say you don't have a solution. People ask me for a solution. I say the solution's going to look something like what happened with the truckers in Canada. Where you have to figure out a way to shut down their capitalism to where it hurts them, and something that what Christian Smalls did on Staten Island, where a black guy organized a bunch of Trump voters to stand up against Jeff Bezos and Amazon and created a union. So it's got to come from the ground up, and it's got to come from workers aligning across class lines, and you can't do that by saying, hey, who's here is a gun nut, you're out. Who's here is against LGBTQ, you're out. You can't do that. You have to come together and fight the great. It's no longer left, right. It's us against them.
It's us against them. It's right against wrong. And,
That's right.
I think some of it starts with disregarding them. They're terribly po-faced. They take themselves incredibly seriously. Like that clip you had of Harari, and you could see and the people that we see at Davos and all of the rest of it, they really do take themselves incredibly seriously. And their bubbles are readily burst by, you can burst their pomposity with ridicule, and at the very least by just turning your back on them. I sometimes am made to think of, the horse whisperer, that said they're herd animals, these people, and they want your attention. And if you just turn away from them and walk away, we should all just turn away from them and walk away. And then they will suddenly want our attention again. They think they've got us. They think that time has passed. As I say, we seem to have gone into this "what are you going to do about it anyway" phase of civilization. But they think that is the reality. But it only lasts as long as people keep playing their part in the pantomime, i.e., being the audience. They're up there on with their cheap sets and their makeup slipping off their faces, and we know that they're just trotting out familiar lines. We've heard all the songs before, and if people would just, as it were, get up out of their seats and just walk out. Just walk out of the theatre, and then we might have a party.
Well, Neil, I really appreciate you making time for our show and staying up late. And everybody should check out your online show, which is that you have a YouTube channel, you have a Patreon. Everybody should subscribe and support your work. You're doing great work. You're a real truth teller and a breath of fresh air. I always enjoy whenever I get to catch your show. So I really appreciate you coming on, and I hope to talk. Tell your wife I said hello, and I hope to see you next time I'm over there in Europe.
Please do. Thanks, Jimmy. It's a real pleasure to talk to you. Thanks to the whole team for setting this up. I'll look forward to doing it again sometime.
Okay, you've been very generous. All right, let's take a break, and we'll be right back.
found a rabbi hole, tunnels and all. There's Jews in the walls. Isn't it bliss? The rabbinical grace soiling the mattresses. Well, let me tell you. If I were Rabbi Shmuley and diddle 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 digga digga diddle diddle dum, all day long I'd diddle little bums. If I were a Shmuley man, I'd peddle all my dildos, dreidel dildos, selling dildos with my daughter and her mum. If I were a Jewish Shmuley man, I'd be digging with a dildo in my bum. I'd wear a grotesque nose and go grab some goyim right on the nipple with a pinch. A Shabbos lap dance brace for the youngest mensch.
At this time, more than any other time, you know, revolution is necessary. It is necessary. Not only based on what has happened with the MOVE organization, you know, the babies that have been murdered, you know, MOVE adults that have been murdered, bombs being dropped on us, but past that to what is happening with all black people, so-called minority people, you know, money poor people. You know, this government, as has been said earlier, has waged war on us. But you know, something about us, particularly here in America, we don't really understand that. You know, we don't really know what war is. You know, for black people, for poor people, that people see as good, that they wasn't forced to do, that they didn't do to try to keep black people appeased, you know, and calm down so that black people wouldn't riot. A prison situation is a crystallized example of that. You can make phone calls in prison. They have movies in prison, but they don't have those things because they just want to be nice to prisoners. They have those things because they know damn well if they don't have, you know, people being able to contact their family, if they don't have, you know, facilities for people to sit there and watch movies, people are going to be frustrated, upset, and they're going to direct that frustration at them prison administrators, and they're going to have riots on their hands. You know, they're going to have people in them prisons turning them prisons out. That's why they have movies. That's why they have access to phones the way they do. And a stop to it when we don't like it, or encouraging it when it's something that's in our interest. You know, we have to call the shots. The people have to take the reins of this system and start dictating, you know, what we need, what needs to be done. And, you know, taking the initiative to do it ourselves. We can't rely on this system. I mean, you know, don't people see what's happening? Every single confrontation that MOVE people have been involved in, every single issue, you know, oppression, economic issues, every single issue facing our people, you know, is something that can be dealt with very, very simply. All people got to do is make their wishes known. All people have to do is stand up and say, listen, we're not accepting that. Unity is the key. Unity is the key to revolution. Revolution ain't nothing to be afraid of. It ain't nothing to shy away from. Revolution, contrary to what officials, you know, this system and those backing the officials running this system, you know, want people to believe that revolution means violence, you know, means blood in the street. I'm saying it can get to that point, but it don't have to be violent. You know, when people come together and take a strong stand on an issue, this government don't have no choice but to listen. Where you think they get their authority from? They don't have no power, but they do have authority to do certain things. Where you think they get it from? They get it from us, from the people. You know, They get it from us accepting the things that they do to be done to stop it. Then you have some people who want to then turn around and say, yeah, well, you know, it's the best we have, and want to make excuses. The time for excuses is over. It's over. You know, every man, woman, and child has to be involved in this revolution. Not only has to be, but is, whether you want to be or not. I mean, our babies gave their lives for this revolution on May 13th. You know, men, women, and children were murdered. And not just move babies, you know. What about all of the young men, women, you know, children 8, 9 years old shot down on the street by cops, you know, by drug pushers? I mean, you know, where do you think that mentality comes from? It comes from this system, from the mentality of this system of getting over, you know, making a quick buck, you know. I'm saying that's where that needs to be done to stop it. Then, you know, what I want people to really, really understand is that it's past time. It is past time for poor people, black people, you know, to realize that this system has failed you. It has failed you. You can't get nothing from it. And what people got to do is withdraw our support from it and start doing for ourselves. That's what we got to do. You know, how long are people going to sit back and beg, you know, this government to do what's right when for hundreds of years all you've gotten is a slap in the face? All you've gotten is this government kicking your ass. That's all. That's all black people have ever gotten from this government.
Hey, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there for more AM Joy and the rest of MSNBC. And click on any of the videos right here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. And you can get more videos from MSNBC for free every day with our newsletters. Just visit